everyone, and welcome back to Tag Talks. Next up in fashion, the podcast where we talk to fashion designers, emerging fashion brands, and fashion industry news. I'm Nick Sutton-Smith.
I'm Janae Green.
I'm Asia DeVaz-Sterling.
And this week, very first guest on the podcast, which we're very excited to get into. We are joined, I suppose, let's just let you take it away, I guess. Guest number one. Do you want to just give us a quick intro to you?
Yeah.
What you do?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, all three of you, for the intro. I'm super excited to get into it. My name is Seven. I am actually a director at the House of Tag. Wanted to start this off by coming into it and bringing in kind of experience that I've seen around supporting fashion designers and brands so far, as well as just with business in general, and jumping straight into it. So to give you a little bit of information about me, I kind of started my entrepreneurial journey around about 4 years ago. Ended up starting a essentially youth market research agency, joining in with a business partner of mine. We went into companies like Nike, Nando's, Superdry, and a few others, and just brought in some incredible young people to work with them. We learned a lot through that kind of experience around what it means to be a good organization, what it means to be good people who help it create value for the world, and be successful as a result of that. And then a couple of years later, we got approached by an organization, which is now the House of Tag, which was aiming to bring together the fashion industry and the fashion community. And I kind of went, why is this relevant to me? Like, fashion was something that was totally off my radar. And I realized a couple of really interesting things about fashion. Number one is that it is so important for people, for individuals. It is so important for how we express ourselves and our identities. And because of that, and because of all that experience I had seeing just how impactful the people within the organization are on the organization and how important that is, I decided to go whole hog with it and see where it took me. So these kind of few years later, working on building that up and really building a community around that. But I still am a social entrepreneur at heart. So I am a kind of business builder, doing various kind of different things around that, and also doing some coaching. So that's a little bit about me. Yeah.
I know that we've already spoken on the podcast about entrepreneurship, and that's kind of how we all came together through the House of Tag, which combines the world of entrepreneurship and fashion. As you alluded to, that you are in House of Tag, one of the key things that we're looking to do is bring a spotlight to new and emerging founders. Moving into that realm, what do you think are the key things that new and emerging, maybe founders, CEOs, but in the fashion industry, designers maybe, what do they need to do to really make themselves known within the industry?
How would I go about kind of making myself known in the industry, or supporting a founder to become known in their industry?
Yeah.
That's a really interesting one. I think that comes down a lot to understanding what you care about, right? A lot of the time we do stuff either because we think it'll be fun or interesting, or maybe the complete flip side, we don't care about it at all, but we think it'll be profitable or something like that. And what a founder needs to do is come from a place of purpose, as well as a place from genuinely understanding who they're serving and why that value adds that value to the world. At the end of the day, even if it is just a for-profit business with making products, those products are contributing something to someone's life in some way. To really define that niche, define that value, which starts from a place of defining who you are and why you're the person who will be the one to do that. That is one of probably the most powerful things you can do to start building, whether it's community or just your fans, you know what I mean? Building up fans around you who care about what you're doing. That is one of the best ways to get started when it's completely new, when you're just jumping into it kind of from nowhere.
I'd like to kind of add a follow-on question to that. Coming from a coaching background myself, I'm really interested to hear more about coaching and why you think it's really important in terms of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think that coaching is something that goes under the radar unless you're in a position where you really don't know what you're doing, and then you get bombarded by lots of people online who are like, I'm a coach for this, I'm a coach for that. And the real sweet spot between those two things with coaching is when you've got someone who is experienced in a certain way, who wants to understand you as an individual and help bring that out. Because the thing about coaching is that it recognizes that we kind of have the answers, right? So if you, for example, didn't know what your next big business move was going to be, it wouldn't be up to someone else to tell you what you should do, because people do what they want to do. If you want to do something that you aren't doing, it's probably more likely that you're wanting to do something that is keeping you from doing that thing more than you want to do that thing, as opposed to the fact that you just don't want to do it. We have those answers within us already. We have the abilities, we have the feelings, the intuition. And what coaching does is it asks you the right questions and brings that out, and then just wraps a little bit of knowledge and applies that to it, so that it's a little bit more focused, and that's great. But it just brings out what is already within you through listening and through applied knowledge and experience. And I think that when you are not just when you're just starting out, but also when you get to a higher level and things get more stressful for you, what that does is it allows you to kind of get clarity, because otherwise you're in your own head. An expression I like to use is that if you think something is going well, but you don't know, and you're not asking anyone else, it's a little bit like looking into a mirror and expecting someone else to look back at you. You know, if you're stuck in your own head, you've only got your own voice. Having that someone else to bounce things off of, and it doesn't even necessarily need to be a coach. It can just be someone else who kind of understands and is willing to listen. Then you can evolve so much from that, so much more than you could kind of just trying to do everything yourself.
How long does the coaching process last? Like, is it something that's ongoing, or is it really only for the emerging designers that are just, or not even designers, business people that are breaking in? When do you kind of let them run free and go do things on their own, or is it a continuous relationship?
I think within small business in general, and I think this applies even more so to fashion and the fashion industry and emerging brands in this industry, is that you need to do what is tailored to you, right? So you mentioned the word relationship there. I think those relationships, that is essentially what it is. You don't have coaching kind of a coach and a coachee. You have a coaching partnership, which is a certain type of relationship in which people work together. And when applying like how that works, if I work with someone for like 3 months or 6 months, that might be all they needed, but that doesn't mean that relationship disappears. So we're probably still talking. We're probably still friends, because that's what happens when you coach someone for a while. You get to know them really well. You know, that is inevitably what happens. And the best thing to do there, or the best reason, I should say, why that's the case, is because maybe they'll come back and need some support. Maybe you will get to a point, which could start at any point in your journey, depending on who you are, what you're doing, and where and when, and all the W's and how. Depending on all those details, it could start whenever. But never ends, because that support can always, again, it comes back to that listening. It never hurts to have someone listening, but it will definitely hurt if you don't have anyone listening. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I agree. I feel like it is a relationship where even if the more mentorship part is done, you're still kind of in their corner, supporting them, cheering them on, and just like being more of a support system for them after that.
Mentorship, and that's another thing. There is mentorship, because a coach can be a mentor, but mentorship is almost like, it's almost a little bit more. It's almost little bit more like you're saying, I'm choosing to believe in you, and I want to be on your journey with you. And that's another important thing. And I think a lot of coaches act as mentors, and a lot of mentors act as coaches, but it's another important thing, especially for emerging designers, and especially right now, in such difficult times, to have mentors and have people who, like you said, are fighting in your corner. Because, well, okay, the only problem I have with that statement is that it suggests that you're kind of fighting someone, right? It kind of suggests that you need someone in your corner because it's a boxing ring, and you gotta get pushed back out there, and you gotta fight. You gotta, go for the next round. The reason why I don't quite think that is right is because, in my experience, the number one thing that actually ends up holding founders back is themselves. So it's a crazy statistic. I say crazy, it actually makes a lot of sense when you break it down, but what feels like a crazy statistic, something like 90% of all businesses ever founded in the world will fail. That like crazy high percentage, or again, maybe it's not that crazy, but initially you go, what?
It's pretty crazy.
Because why is it that they're so likely to fail? Why is it that they're so likely to shut down? I think 5 years is kind of the ballpark. Like, how many of them shut down within 5 years? And it ends up being around 90% worldwide. Differs from country to country, but it's high everywhere. And it kind of makes sense when you see it from a perspective of our education systems and support systems don't help us be independent, don't help us learn to be leaders. And that really is the key word, is leadership. You could be like the least technical person ever, but if you have great leadership, you're able to actually make things move so much more than a lot of other people are, and why leadership is such an important skill. So within an industry like fashion, especially when something crazy like 40% of the industry has just been like destroyed by COVID, like there's just been a huge like wave has just come in. To be a leader and to practice leadership puts you at such an advantage, even if you aren't sure and need that mentorship to get to the next level, because you don't have that experience. It's that leadership that will allow you to do that right, to find the right mentorship, and ultimately make the right decisions.
So do you think entrepreneurs need a coach and a mentor?
I think not every entrepreneur will need a coach at every point in their life, or every point in their journey, I should say. And I think mentorship is an interesting one because, again, they can overlap. So you can have a mentor who coaches you. Right. I think the number one thing to have is a mentor, if you can. And that is much easier said than done because, again, it ends up being a relationship where it's really down to who you both are, and the mentor kind of being able to look at who you are in your journey as an entrepreneur and going, I want to support you. I want to see you kind of take off, and I want to impart my experience onto you. Coaching is more specific than that. So if you're say you're a designer and you need to expand your business in a very specific way, then you can try to find a relevant coach for you. But if you're just starting out and you have your education and you know what your next steps are, the best thing to do is find a mentor, to find someone who can bring you, or to join your journey and say, let's move in this direction. It's a little bit more of an intimate relationship in that way, and that they really want to care about you for you. And that's it. They're not getting anything. Mentors don't really get anything in return, in my opinion. Some people like charge for coaching, but they call themselves mentors. I really dislike that. I think a mentor really should be almost like a a bigger an older sibling or another parent or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a volunteer position.
Yeah, exactly. They're there to support you just because they care, and it's the strongest because of that relationship. Because of how powerful human connection is, it's that relationship that will propel you, because it excites you. It's exciting to have someone going, I'm fighting for you. Again, bad metaphor, but I'm fighting for you in your corner. It's cool.
As I say, that's super insightful. As someone who has a coach and some mentors, I can completely see where you're coming from. Really great experiences, both of them. But kind of switching it up, I just want to talk about you as an entrepreneur, how you have experience already, and then you've come into the fashion industry. So it'd be really great to hear about kind of what the differences are and what your kind of observations and insights are coming into the industry as an already established entrepreneur.
Interesting. So I guess one of the main things I've noticed as I've gotten more involved, I should say, in the fashion industry, I've also gotten more involved simultaneously, but completely separately, in the music industry. So I came into these two different industries, like from completely different non-creative industries. And something I've noticed, especially within these creative industries, is that they're all completely different from each other. They all have their own language. They all have their own unspoken rules. It's super fascinating, but it can also mean that it's harder for people outside of that industry to understand your issues, the challenges you face, the things that you need to overcome, and just what you're feeling, right? Like, we think, oh, I've hit a stumbling block in my coaching business and I've hit a stumbling block in my fashion business. They're both stumbling blocks. Maybe they're both marketing issues. Maybe I'm just bad at marketing, period. But then within fashion, that will require you to do very different things. Within a service-based business, that will require you to do very different things. Within music, within any creative business, it's like they're their own industry. They are their own industries, but it's like they're their own categories. You know what I mean? It's very interesting. I think one of the main things I've noticed is that despite those differences, we're all human, right? Which means you're going to have some of the same foundational problems either way. A lot of entrepreneurs get started because they want to do the work. So if I'm a fashion designer, I love designing. So I want to get into fashion so that I can design. And I kind of hope that the business part of a fashion business will just kind of take care of itself. But it doesn't. If I'm choosing to be an entrepreneur, I'm choosing to start a business. And if my experience and my knowledge and my understanding isn't in business, then I'm a designer who has no one to buy my products. And I have no way of communicating with people, that I need to have relationships with them. I have no one who, understands how much they should be sold for, things like that. So there are some pretty big differences, but at the end of the day, we all start from the same.
So are there any kind of key qualities an entrepreneur should have across the board going into any industry?
Yeah, 100%. I have a list in descending order, which is super convenient. Number one is a skill called self-introspection, which sounds like a really big word, but essentially is the ability to reflect, to understand what's happened and why, and to take the appropriate amount of responsibility. So what happens a lot if responsibility was on a scale, you have people who take absolutely no responsibility for things when something goes wrong. And then you have people who take too much responsibility, put the whole weight of the world on their shoulders, and they just feel terrible. And both of those things, for pretty obvious reasons, are not helpful. They're really unconstructive because you aren't learning what would be reasonable for you to do next time to avoid those same mistakes. So self-introspection as an ability to reflect and to communicate that with the team helps everyone learn and grow. And it's a self-introspective person is someone who's really hungry to do that. They're hungry to get far. They're hungry to learn, to improve, which is what you want on your team, right? It's what you want to be able to do. Number 2 is communication. Very close second is communication. Again, for reasons that are probably pretty obvious, but I think it goes overlooked very often and very easily just how impactful bad communication can be, because communication I sort of see as the key that unlocks action and that unlocks new business. Not just new business, like new action, new anything. With bad communication, we'll end up following like a lack of trust. And if people don't trust each other, they start acting in ways that means they will trust each other even less. And so I call that the poor communication death spiral, where it literally just keeps getting worse and worse until the team or the organization just breaks apart. Because you can't just let things slide. You can't not address issues. You can't, just leave things or be slack, because then people will just not know what to do next and will be confused about what is going on. And it just makes everyone feel like crap. So that's pretty much it. Number 3 is initiative. So initiative is, again, it's probably pretty self-explanatory, but the reason I find initiative so important is because, and this is very specific to small business. I think in a lot of like huge corporations, they'd be like, ew, initiative. Why are you trying to do new things? That doesn't help, because they have what they want to do. But in a small and even medium-sized business, initiative is something that propels you to do new things and come up with new ideas that keeps the organization going and keeps it just more interesting and keeps it fresh. And I think without that, eventually people get bored. And the reason it's so important on the flip side of that is, funny enough, the people who have initiative feel better. It's not just about, I want someone else to have initiative because it's is good for the organization. If someone else has initiative, it makes them feel good to use it. Human beings love being creative, which is ironic considering the fact that creativity is really stifled when we grow up and stuff like that, I'd argue. And it's even more relevant to a creative business, whether it's fashion or anything else. It's so relevant to be innovative as a result of taking that initiative. And number 4, final thing, finally, I know I feel like this is my answer's taken forever, but something that I think is really understated is empathy. I don't think businesses that don't have empathy or that don't promote team members and people and you as the entrepreneur being an empathetic person are going to survive in the next within the next 10 or so years. I genuinely believe that things like that are going to go downhill because people don't like it. A competitor who is nicer than you is much more attractive to potential employees and things like that. Having empathy allows you to grow. It makes people feel better. So it is a necessity for a modern, I would say a modern business of any kind, but especially, again, a small startup emerging business. The reason those 4 things I think matter for you as an entrepreneur, if you were to be your own, you as, someone starting your own business, is because those are the things you would want everyone else to have if they were to work with you. So how can you not have those things yourself? It's basically the short version. You need to embody these qualities so that you are able to inspire others to. And that is what builds a business up from just being you doing whatever you want to do to actually being an organization.
Great. Super rich answer. And I guess that kind of goes back to leadership, because all the qualities you kind of listed off there, everything that I would want in myself as a leader, but also like in a boss as well.
100%. 100%.
So if I'm an entrepreneur and say I can't afford coaching and I don't really know anyone in the industry that I want to get in to mentor me, what are some resources that I can use?
That's a really, really good question. As much as it's a really ironic point about mentoring coming from me as someone who's actually never had a mentor. Really ironic, really, really ironic thing, because it can feel like if they're, like you said, I can't think of anyone who's right to mentor me. What do I do? It is literally that conversation, but that you end up having with yourself at some point, unless someone's come up to you to ask, if they can mentor you. The way I kind of went about it, from my experience, it was a mix of networking. So meeting with people who love doing what they do for a once off isn't really a big commitment. It isn't really a commitment at all for a lot of people. A lot of people are happy to go, I'm happy to sit down with you for an hour, talk through whatever you want to learn about, my experiences, etc., just for free, just for funsies, just to give someone that kind of knowledge or experience. People love doing that. People are super happy to do that. Connect with people on LinkedIn, figure out kind of what they do and what they love, and if that's kind of right for you, and then just send a very genuine message saying, I'd love to learn this from you. Can we jump on a half an hour call or something like that, just so I can ask you some questions? Especially if you're just starting out, whether you're a young person, maybe you've just come out of uni or something, or maybe you're not a young person, but you are just starting an entrepreneurship, which means you're young to entrepreneurship. You're not experienced in that. People are like, yeah, let's sit down. Let's have a quick chat. That is genuinely so powerful. And again, if you're that self-introspective person, even if it's only a half-hour chat, you can get so much from that. Mm-hmm. The only other thing I would say is reading. As cliche and boring as that sounds, so much of what I have either grown to do, or sometimes even that I've delivered, is come partly or started to come from something I've read in a book.
I think something that's really important is also knowing what you want out of the people that you're trying to connect with. Because I've gotten, and I'm sure everyone here has gotten, very generic messages on LinkedIn. How did you get to where you are? And you're like, I need a day to sit down with you and tell you exactly how I got to where I am. So it's asking very specific questions just to be conscious of their time. You don't want to waste anyone's time.
100%. And people, the thing is that they will appreciate that. They'll appreciate a very thoughtful message that says, this specific thing you've done, that's just so interesting to me because of this reason. You know what I mean? Something that's very specific as opposed to being very general. People are like, oh, I'm touched at you. You looked at it. Yay.
Right. Exactly.
Even if they're super experienced, people don't really get bored of people being interested in them, It's this really weird thing about being human.
It's true. It's flattering.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you mentioned at the top of the show, you've taken all of what you've been talking about and all of your experience. You're now founder of the House of Tag. Where do you see that business moving forward? Where do you see that sitting in the fashion industry as we move forward?
Really interesting. I'll say as much as I'm able to say, as much as I'm allowed to say. What I see Tag evolving into is something that is what I use the word wraparound support, which it's a quick little side story. One of the first organizations I was ever involved in building was essentially a kind of tech and program-based support nonprofit to support rough sleepers when I was living in Scotland for a little while. And something that came out of that was the idea of what wraparound support is. So wraparound support is essentially within whatever you're doing and whoever you want to support, you're looking at all the angles from which they might need support and providing them that support. So it's like it's wraparound, or 360 support might be another good word for it. Within the House of Tag, I really see it as being this wraparound support organization for the fashion industry. So we are planning to launch technology, we're planning to launch educational resources, platforms, as well as kind of community content like this that anyone can kind of take away new learning from. An organization that really covers all those bases and just provides value for the fashion industry in all of these different ways, because it is, like I said, as a creative industry, it is something that has so many facets and so many people who get into it because they love being creative. But then what does that mean for their business? So we really want to bridge all of those gaps.
So the House of Tag is a great resource for someone who doesn't have a mentor or a coach. This is also a really great resource for those entrepreneurs.
That's a good point. Yeah. I don't want to sound, see, the thing is, I don't want to sound too salesy. I don't want to, we aren't on here for, just for everyone listening, like we're not on here to promote the House of Tag. We're on here to give you that value. And through that, we hope that you're able to just take away from it as much as you can, whether it's this podcast, any of the other resources that we put out, or any future mentoring that we offer. As an example, all of these things are things that we want you to just take as much value from as you can.
So coming back to you, yourself as an entrepreneur, what is your North Star? What is your mission? What are you in this for?
I think I made a kind of resolution that I will always be some level of mix between being a coach and being a social entrepreneur. So my thing is social entrepreneurship. And I've kind of mentioned it like here and there within the podcast episode, as opposed to just being like an entrepreneur, a business builder, is social entrepreneur. That kind of is my mission. It's a very loaded one. So to jump into a really quick little story. When I was back, I was only I was only 18. I really did not know what I wanted to do with my life. And I was going to be going to university next year. I was spending 3 months living in a mountaintop village in Nepal, volunteering and living with a local family, with a host family. And there's a book that I brought with me that I got given to me at an event we had it's conducted all over the world, called We Day in big cities all over the world. London has a We Day. Toronto, New York, loads of cities have a We Day organized by an organization called We. That's and what they do is they have this whole socially entrepreneurial kind of system where they get young people to do volunteering that has an impact, raises money. They sell products. They support local organizations to local communities in developing countries to make those products, pay them fairly for it. So they get paid, they can do their charity work, and they've turned a local community into the main kind of business, the main kind of breadwinners, if you will, in their communities, things like that. They have all of these systems that just work so well together to make the world a better place and to have an economic kind of benefit as well, to change lives. I kind of brought this book with me that I got from We Day, went there, again, not knowing what I wanted to do with my life whatsoever, reading this book, which is called We Economy, learning about the concept of social entrepreneurship, and kind of had this light bulb moment where I went, this is perfect. Because I knew I wanted to make an impact on the world. I knew I wanted to help people and connect with them, but I also wanted to change my life. And being very blunt, a lot of people get into entrepreneurship because they want to change their life, usually financially. They want to have a successful business that gives them that freedom. Coming from a background where I didn't have any of that, that was also a big goal of mine. But I had no idea how to do that, and almost felt like I was betraying my beliefs about wanting to help people if I tried to do that. Then I learned about social entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurship is essentially a way of changing the world and changing your life at the same time, because you're choosing to bake positive action into everything that you do, but still making it sustainable and to some extent for profit. So you're actually solving both of those things at the same time. My main mission in life is to be able to do as much of that as possible, to change the world as much as possible while still changing my life and the lives of the people that I work with. So even when I'm working on like a for-profit business, it's still socially entrepreneurial in the sense that I will bake that into it as much as possible, whether it's making sure we start out by making sure like everyone who's on a salary is on a living wage, like no compromising on that, making sure we're carbon neutral or carbon positive, same kind of thing, will not compromise on that. Things like that get baked into the system, as well as having like non-for-profit mentoring, for example, is one of our plans with the House of Tag, is to have a non-profit free mentoring program for young people, baking that into the process of the overall business. So that is really kind of the main thing for me. And the reason I think that's so important to understand is because the values of that, which is to say like purely adding value to the world because it's the right thing to do and it makes it a better place, will also make your organization run better. The way I've had it explained to me by a coach of mine is, imagine there were 4 different businesses, each doing exactly the same thing. Say all 4 of them were like luxury women's wear. That was the exact, and they all made the exact same products, exact same price, quality, everything. One of them stood for climate change and did things around climate change. One of them stood for women's rights and they did things around women's rights. One of them stood for like literally like any other cause, like issues around race and making the world more equal and issues around equality. And one of them, the 4th one, stood for absolutely nothing. Which one would you bring your business to? Probably one of the first 3, but who would bring their business to the 4th one? Because they wouldn't resonate with anybody. And that is the essence of baking real, and I use the word baking into a lot. I use that term a lot, but it really is about cementing that quality, whatever that is that means for you, into everything that you do, because it sets you apart, and I believe it's the future of business.
Great. I mean, having that intrinsic kind of purpose of social entrepreneurship is commendable. I think we all agree. And I think it's really relevant at the moment. I think people have a purpose and they have a mission in their professional lives and their personal lives. And no one kind of has one job anymore. And they're kind of pursuing this North Star, and they're actually getting to have like this really good adventure because they're getting all these different experiences that are going to really feed into who they are and feed their soul and what it is they want to have an impact on in life. So I think it's a really amazing thing that you're doing.
I love that. I think that is the most important thing, I guess, using that word North Star, having that guiding light be something that is more specific. So something like, my guiding light is to have the best fashion business. That is not going to help you probably, because that is a step in the journey that is like a goal along the journey, but it isn't a purpose. Having something that is more meaningful, I say specific, the specific was the wrong word, something that's more like logistical, like that's to do with the numbers. As important as that is, the thing that should guide you should always be a purpose, because that is deeper, is more meaningful. Like you said, it's food for your soul. Again, I love that term. It's a reason to actually put your energy into it. If someone's only motivated by money, they just stop caring. That is inevitable. That's what history has shown us. Like eventually it peters out, and the new and innovative things don't come from the people who are in it for anything other than, because they care. Basically, because it's part of their passion and their purpose.
That's been a really interesting and pretty big deep dive into who you are. It's been an interesting chat with you, Seven.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I can carry on this chat all day.
Yeah, there's so many good nuggets of information.
Well, it's been a really, really interesting one. I feel like this one wasn't super specific to fashion, but I think overall the creative industry has come a long way and also has a lot further to go. So hopefully this can contribute to that just a little bit.
Thank you very much for being our first guest, Seven. And thank you all for tuning into this episode. We've been Tag Talks, Next Up in Fashion, presented by the House of Tag. We've been bringing you all things fashion. We hope this episode has been valuable and fun for you, and we will see you all next time.